Thank you, Professor Arvind Kumar. That was a very wide spectrum of things which were covered. Now, it is interesting when you're sitting here, you see the expressions coming from there when you agree on certain ideas and you don't agree. I will take about a couple of questions now before I go to Professor Hiregange. Anybody, please lift your hands up. Your name, introduction, and your question in brief.
I'm Suhas. I come from ICAS Manipal, that's International Center for Applied Science. First, I just want to ask whether I'm wrong, because I don't agree completely with the idea of democracy, which Sir told, because when we talk about people, because like all the people, like when people choose our leaders, like we choose our leaders, but when Gandhi told, I don't know about this time, but when we see now, people are very gullible. So why do you say that democracy is the best form of government? And also I want to talk about I totally agree with the equality idea, but if that was achieved by Gandhi, why do we still have reservation classes and all when it comes to education and everything else? That's it.
So two questions here. One is whether democracy is warranted. Yeah. Second is equality, why reservation is. Professor Arvind Kumar, would you like to do or shall I take?
See, when Gandhi was talking about democracy, as I say, that he was mostly emphasizing on the need to have a democratic regime where you have a bottoms-up approach. In fact, you really cannot really ignore the common people. So he was basically very concerned about decentralization, the grassroots democracy. So he was a person who wanted to see that how people really are becoming a part of democracy. And he was talking about participatory democracy. He was obviously concerned about the neglect of the common masses. He was thinking that even the neglect of the common masses and the division which the society had seen, rich and poor, again low caste, upper caste. So he was very concerned about those aspects. If you compare between democratic regime and authoritarian regime and try to bring out the benefit and risk, and if you articulate that what are the benefits of democratic regime, what are the benefits of authoritarian regime, you will find a lot of, in fact, areas where you will get democratic regime coming better than authoritarian regime. And it's all obvious because unless because you can take example of all the major authoritarian regime, especially in the current ongoing imbroglio in West Asia, and you see what really is happening. The transition itself is so difficult. Even if you take, for example, China, slowly I think they are obviously giving certain liberty to very in a limited manner to the people, but still they really have no rights whatsoever in terms of they can express freely. Unless you express freely, it's very difficult to really have the enlargement of the larger masses in terms of integrating with a system which they have certain feeling about the nation and the larger goal of the nation. So I think democratic regime certainly would be preferable to the authoritarian regime. This is what I will say. On the questions of equality which you are talking about, I think he was very clear. And he was not talking about only a particular society or a particular nation. He basically had opined that the whole world should be made free from discrimination. And that is how he in fact wanted to see the world to be. When I say that it really has not been able to happen over the years, we see more and more discrimination in every way, because the way you divide the world between developed and developing, more challenges gets accrued. And in that you see the divisions are very visible and clear. So in fact he wanted to see that how, if you have a consensus built on a particular trade policy, it should not discriminate a small country. It should not discriminate a country which is less productive. It should not discriminate a country which really is not at par with the other. Even you see developing world, you have divisions. And these divisions can be seen only when you know about their GDP contribution, their GDP growth rate, their economic development. So everywhere you see the division. So his idea was that once a nation, as I said in the beginning, that most of the time he has spent in terms of providing a very broad-based understanding of freedom, the concept of freedom, and the larger concept of autonomy. And in that he brought these many areas from his experience which he had got, like racial discrimination, economic discrimination. So a lot of these things. In the current scenario, I think most of these things which you are seeing happening in the Indian society, where you have reservation policy, these again are the larger part of the debate happening already. And again, idea is to uplift the lower class of the people so that they can really be a part of mainstream. We have failed in many ways in terms of implementing our reservation policy. That is a different part of discourse. But at the same time, there is no denying the fact that we would like to see that how best the people in the lower strata become a part of the mainstream. And there is no way by which you can bring other than many of these special privileges which you give. These are debatable. Even if you see the backward class reservation, if you see the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, many of these things are happening in many places. These are just to see how best they can really uplift their position, elevate their status, and see that they become a part of larger mainstream in Indian society.
Good morning. My name is Arvind Kumar and I'm from Department of Commerce, Manipal University. So, Sir talked about inconsistency in Gandhi's behavior. I would like to call that inconsistent hypocrisy because at one point of time, Gandhiji was talking about non-violence, and other point of time he was channelizing his energy, his reputation to organize troops for the West during World War II. So, don't you think that was hypocrisy on his part?
Hello, my name is Abhinav Datta and I'm a postgraduate scholar over here in this department. So my question is like Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence and India's acquisition of nuclear weapons. So I just want to know that whether Mahatma Gandhi, did he have any influence of Mahatma Gandhi on India's nuclear missile program, and like, and so it's quite contradictory, right? So that's what I want to know.
I think one thing is very clear about his inconsistency, which I call, and the point which you said. See, I think he was a part of that larger recruitment which had happened where Indian soldiers had participated, had been sent for World War II, participation in the World War II. The point is that Gandhi himself was very much aware of the larger repercussions which the World War II was going to happen on the world system, very much aware. And he wanted to see that how India, in that point in time, is seen to be emerging as a responsible country in addressing to these many issues. I will give you an example. When the whole question of the establishment of the United Nations system was coming as a part of discourse, much before the World War II got over, a conference happened at San Francisco. It was Mahatma Gandhi who took the lead in terms of sending a delegation from India. That time India had not become India. It was British India. British India had sent one delegation separately. And India had sent a delegation separately. This was led by Sarojini Naidu. Question basically, this was led by Vijayalakshmi Pandit. And if you see that how he was able to foresee the world is going to be, and how the nature of the system is going to be changed, he was not able to see the emerging power game. See, 45, the whole equation of this world system got changed. He was assassinated in 48. That was the beginning of all these strategic power equations. See, he was not able to envisage that the world is going to be totally different in terms of bifurcating itself in two different blocks. The signs of those things were coming because, as you know, the capitalist bloc and the communist bloc each were being created. And as you know that many of these nations which had emerged, they were either joining the capitalist bloc or the communist bloc. There was no third system in that technical sense, which India, after India became independent, it started again a concept of non-alignment. So what I'm trying to say is that many of these things obviously had inconsistency in terms of his thinking about the societal trends which were emerging or the national trends which were about to emerge. India had become independent in 47 and he was there only for 5 months, 6 months. He was not even able to grasp the way the war which erupted after India became independent with Pakistan. And a lot of these issues which he saw happening created a lot of division in the society. As you know that the whole civil society was burning. And within 6 months he got assassinated. So you see the whole trend which was evolving technically was certainly not envisaged that the world is going to be that complex. Now the world has become more complex. The complexity has not been decreasing. how best India can manage this complexity, address to its concern, and also maximizing its national interest becomes a part of challenge for India. So again, I will see that inconsistency was again seen to be a part of his larger notion that how nations can be more autonomous, how nations can really enjoy freedom, how this really can be more independent. So whenever he talks about many of these things, you find situations really were prevailing. In fact, one of these interview which in fact he had tough time in answering, that Gandhiji, you talk about non-violence. And what will happen if someone molests your sister? And he had a tough time to answer that question. So I think one has to be very practical and real in terms of understanding Gandhian philosophy, in which ways, in what matter, and then only things can become better for correlating these concepts. Other thing, I think one has to really understand that why India acquired nuclear weapons is a different story. I think when the US used this bomb, both in Nagasaki and Hiroshima in 1945, Gandhi was perhaps one of the very few from India which really argued against this nuclear weapon. And his comment was that the humanity is going to perish. The birth of nuclear weapon will help perish the humanity. So that was his thinking. And the very first debate which happened in India about that was again a condemnation of the use of those nuclear weapons. And Gandhi was very much disturbed that if the US has used the bomb on 6th August in Hiroshima, why it repeated? Why it repeated on 9th? Knowing it well, the destruction which it caused again has had a lot of implications for the survival of the humanity. Why it used on 9th? So he himself was very much disturbed. He was against nuclear weapon. But at the same time, if you see the way India evolved, the way the international system has evolved, you will have different realities coming up. India's national security interest can best be served in a nuclear weapon-free world. India's contribution at the United Nations in terms of achieving a nuclear weapon-free world, these contributions have been phenomenal in terms of ideas, in terms of resolutions, in terms of action plan. These have been phenomenal. But unfortunately, there was no sign coming up from the acknowledged nuclear power states to move ahead and eliminate the nuclear weapon from their stockpiles. And as you know, the Cold War got over in 1991, after the demise of the Soviet Union. It is very surprising that both the United States and Russia still have not de-alerted their nuclear warhead, which they had put on hair trigger alert during the Cold War era. So what does that mean to the world? What does that mean to India? And moreover, India saw a deteriorating geopolitical environment in its neighborhood. India saw a visible emerging China-Pakistan nexus. And these two are our so-called less friendly countries. And ultimately, one has to see that how best you can evolve a system where the less friendly countries shall not afford to bully. And there was no way other than acquiring nuclear weapon. So it was again some sort of a geopolitical imperative for India. And it's nowhere that India really has gone against Gandhian ways and Gandhian philosophy. In terms of its principles, still it talks about no first use. It means India will not be the first one to use nuclear weapons. So a lot of these contradictions which existed because of the changes which India's neighbor